First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a big pleasure to come to Ljubljana, and thank you in particular to the organizers, to the director of the Institute, Professor Novak, and to my colleague Romana Lester, and the rest of the team, and congratulations for this 100th anniversary of this important institute. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to be part of this series of lectures, and I will try to make a presentation trying to combine our present work, dealing with religious diversity and minorities, and the topics of migration, minorities in general, raising some questions, putting some questions on the table, bringing some ideas, I hope food for thought, and I hope this is interesting for you. And in case it's not, please remember the fault is not on the speaker, but on the persons who invited the speaker. Natasha, could we start with the presentation? Thank you. So this is the long title of the presentation. Yes, that one. Yeah. Yes. I think I can move with this.
Yes.
No. Yes. No. No.
On the screen, maybe.
Yeah. So this is the long title of the presentation: Migration, Ethnicity and Religious Diversity, Researching for Policies at the Local Level. And then I will try to follow these 3 consecutive steps. The what, some reflections on categories, definitions or indefinitions. The why this is important, about some thoughts about democracy, rights and discrimination. And the how, so how this, the research can be practical in terms of public policies, particularly for local institutions today. Right? So this is going to be the scheme, and I'll start with the first topic, the what. What about diversity, categories, social dynamics. Okay? And here, to begin with, I will refer to migration, because obviously this is one topic which is interesting for all European countries today. And so this line, from immigration to diversity, which is also, I think, the way we have walked, at least from our research perspective in the last 30 years. Migration in itself is a process. So migration is moving people from one place to another. So in a very strict sense, we can consider migration as just a flow, as a process. And it can be regulated, it can be the subject of public policies, of course, the flow. But also migration as a more global phenomenon can be or should be faced from public institutions from another 3 different perspectives. The socio-economic or labor insertion in the new society of migrants, which is normally the subject of so-called immigration integration policies. Then the political membership or citizenship, acquiring citizenship of the country, so acquiring the nationality of the new country. There might be another policy for that, for facilitating the way of integrating people also politically, so they become political members of the community. And another field is cultural identity accommodation, so the management of diversity, in one word. So the migrants, not all migrants are different in terms of cultural elements, but some of them are, and many of them need cultural adaptation as well. Normally in immigration policies, integration policies, both national, regional, local level, normally the states try to regulate this, and then they make an effort also to regulate this, number 1. Not so much on number 3, and very, very little, I would say, on number 2. This more graphical perspective of this. So we could consider migration just in a strict sense, only in this, the regulation of migration flow. And I say this to underline that there is an issue on when a migrant ceases to be a migrant. When we drafted for the Basque government the first Basque plan on immigration, we adopted a central and core idea of the plan inclusive citizenship, meaning that everybody living here is already a member of the community, is already a Basque. So migration finished when they arrived here. The next day, they wake up in this country, they are already citizens. From that perspective, that was a political stand, okay, political position. Obviously, it's not reflected in the legal framework, but we try to focus migration on the process, and then from that moment, to considering the rest of the policies as management of diversity of a society which is every day shaped in a different way and composed by different people. Well, yeah. So, yeah, European societies obviously they are not uniform any longer. Probably they were never uniform. We have this international migration, south, north, east, west, but also, of course, the traditional, so-called traditional old diversity of ethnic minorities, religious minorities, linguistic minorities in many European countries. And they merge, all these two diversities, new and old, they merge, and we don't have instruments, legal, political, efficient instruments to deal with this diversity of diversities. So what is diversity about in our perspective? It is about some cultural elements, but cultural elements are very difficult to define. Okay? They do exist, obviously they do exist, but they are very difficult to define. They are identity markers, language, religion, national feeling, belonging. They are very, very important mobilization factors. They mobilize people. Probably they are the most successful elements in mobilizing people. Now the streets of Ljubljana are full of people dressing in yellow because they are Swedes coming to cheer their national team this evening. And probably this evening there will be other people cheering and following with the flag of Slovenia cheering the team. So these factors, this is belonging, this is identity, this is the feeling of identity to something, which is not social class, which is not the economic level of each one. It's the nation, or it's the flag, it's religion, it's language, it's pro-Palestine or against whatever. So these big factors, these cultural elements which create collective identities are by far the most active factors of mobilizing people today. But they are very complex. They are very complex. It's not always easy to define these factors. What is language? What is religion? What is Serbian a different language from Montenegrin? Is Romanian a different language from Moldovan? Is this church is different from the other big church? So these cultural facts are difficult to define and to make categories with them. And there is always around identity dynamics which are permanent, and it's a permanent comparative exercise. So our identities depend on the scale and depend on the context. There is a lot of fluidity in identities, of course. It's very cool to say that identities are fluid and mixed, complex, and we have many identities at the same time and all that stuff. It's very cool among academics and scholars to say that. But I always say, I don't know many people. I haven't known many people in my life who changed religion 2, 3, 4 times. Most of the people that I know, they secularized, or maybe they picked up something from Buddhism to collect this little thing to include in their Christian tradition. But I don't know many people who shift from Islam to Confucianism, or from, I don't know, Shintoism to Catholicism. And I don't know many people who really change dramatically his or her languages, main languages, or the feeling of identity towards a nation or a minority or a language or whatever. So this fluidity is something which is very rhetoric, but in practice, 98% of the people in our societies feel attached to one flag, to one language, to one religion, to one nation, to one minority nation. And there are, of course, many stereotypes also working on this complex dynamics. And also we have the technology innovations which are transforming our way of living. They transform identities, they reshape identities. They do not destroy the identity game. So I think this is also already pretty clear. It's not that identities are going to disappear. No, they are being transformed in a different way thanks to these new elements that we all bring with us, like smartphones, for instance. The most important thing in my view is this. What is happening is the deterritorialization of relations. Maybe it's not the best way of saying that or the best word, but space, physical space, is always important for us, for human beings and collectivities. Why? Because we have bodies. While I'm here, I cannot be at home because I'm here today. But space is less and less important, and it's going to be less and less important in the future. Okay? Because yes, I'm not at home, but now, today, I can be aware of what is happening in my neighborhood in real time, which was not possible 20, 30 years ago. And now in my language, and I can take the subway or the tram, and in the tram nobody talks to each other. Everybody's talking to another one who is in another place. So everybody's in a different conversation with different people in different spaces. So space is going to be less and less important, and this is going to have an impact in identity dynamics and of course in policies. And this is one of the big issues for the future of politics, I think, because we are used to territorial use of power. We are used to government by territories. So statehood, etc. is based on space. And the human relations are less and less spatial, more and more virtual. But we don't have instruments of governance, virtual governance yet. It's going to be difficult. Also, these new technologies, they have a double effect. On the one hand, they uniform some trends, so they have some impact, creating common models, etc. But at the same time, they have the opposite effect of polarizing, and they permit some minority groups to keep alive, because they can be in different places, but they can be more active than in the past when they had difficult contacts. So, about categories and in definitions. How do we define this in a global scheme? It's very difficult. So what are the minorities we have to deal with? What are these important and mobilized collectivities? From the legal and therefore political perspective, is the current framework is very inconsistent. I would need more clarification, probably some clarification, because it's very, very inconsistent. If you go to international constitutional law, you don't find clear criteria to identify the collectivities or the groups that have to be considered. There is no international valid accepted definition on what is a minority, as you already know. So there is a need to articulate more consistent definitional criteria also for scholars. Okay? Three different, well, before that, sorry. One very quick reference to the idea of super diversity. You know, this is another cool idea let's say, developed by, in the last 20 years on trying to underline some aspects of diversity, of this diversity of diversities. I think it's useful to some extent, but I think it's also a product of academics and scholars looking the world from a perspective which is not many times the reality of, as I said before, 95% of the people. Very limited reception of this anyhow in the legal framework so far. Three small attempts to try to make a consistent scheme. One is to read the European constitutions. So I took 50 European constitutions. We take European in a very wide sense. We will find 50 European constitutions in force today. Okay? Within these 50 European constitutions, we can analyze if they refer to majority groups or to minority groups, how many of them. To non-majority groups, there are 61 mentions. And non-discrimination grounds, 400 mentions. So this means that almost in each European constitution there is a non-discrimination or anti-discrimination clause. And it refers normally to some elements on which discrimination is prohibited. These elements create collectivities, so formally recognized as such. So some factors are very frequent, some others are not so frequent. So this is important for us. No reference to intersectionality in the European constitutions or to multiple discriminations yet. Of course, no reference to individualized algorithmic discrimination, which is what is going to happen in the near future. That discrimination is going to be based on race or age, etc., but on a combination of many factors like those ones, but individualized in each of us. Still, if I count these grounds of discrimination which are considered in the constitutions, European constitutions, I find that religion is at the top. So it's 39 out of 50 constitutions mention religion as a factor not to discriminate against. And then sex, gender identity, all that is also very frequent. Physical appearance, including race, skin color, etc. And then ideology, opinion, national origin, language, much lower, 29, etc. Social status, economic status, birth, ethnicity only in 10 constitutions as such, with that word, and the rest of the factors. Health, only 9. Even if health probably is one of the most risky factors for this algorithmic individualized discrimination in the future. Well, so this is one attempt. So we have seen that religion is there. It was religion and sex, gender. This also reflects a tendency in the last years of including gender in the constitutions, physical appearance and ideology. Well, second attempt to see how many constitutions refer to minorities and what kind of minorities are referred to. It's 29 constitutions out of 50 refer to minority groups, and 19 refer to national groups, national minorities, national communities, national whatever. They call them national for different reasons, but they use the word national. Some 10 constitutions refer to ethnic, whatever, ethnic groups, ethnic minorities, ethnic communities in some cases. Religious minority group community in 16 constitutions. Linguistic minority only in 4, because languages are dealt at the constitutions in a different way. And then it's a racial community in Hungarian constitution. And then the special case of Belgium, which includes in the constitution a reference to ideological or philosophical minorities. And then some constitutions also refer to autochthonous or indigenous peoples, so in Europe, okay, in 6 cases. So in this second attempt, national is the most used one, and then religious and ethnic, these words appear clearly at the top. And then a third attempt, and I will not go into details not to bore you with this, but analyzing 18 existing legal definitions of national minority. Some of them coming from the United Nations or from Council of Europe recommendations, and some others from national acts, legislation, or declarations made by some countries when they ratify the European Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. So if we take all these 18 definitions and we compare these 18 definitions, we can make a scheme and we can identify these 10 elements that they appear in the 18 definitions. And these 10 elements refer to 4 big things, let's say 4 big pillars of the definition. That's what the colors refer to here. In this moment, for us, the most important one is the blue one, because it's an element which is present in all definitions, saying that, well, this group has to be different from the rest of the population, but has to be different how? But has to be different because they share whatever elements, the so-called cultural elements, which are relevant for this particular definition. So we have to analyze now, in each of the 18, this 5th element, because the 18 definitions, they include the element number 5. You see, this is present in all the definitions. So it's very clear that at the core of defining a minority, there must be a difference in terms of some elements. Now, let's go into that element number 5, and we will analyze all these definitions to see what they do quote. And this is the sum in number 5, meaning that in the 18 definitions, how many of these definitions refer to what elements? And the most frequent element here is language. Then it comes religion, ethnicity and culture. This is the same. So linguistic element sometimes refers language, mother tongue, linguistic characteristics, religious element again, ethnic element and cultural element. For the rest are like not very frequent, so that's they go with the others. But it's clear that these are the 3 or 4 which are more present and defining the groups that we are talking about. So there must be something linguistic, religious or ethnic there to consider a group as a minority. Either old or new, that's another issue. So, after these 3 attempts to find consistent categories, we could conclude, well, we could defend that there is an implicit definition of national minority in Europe. It's not so easy to defend this, but we can defend this. But also, the most controversial issue today in Europe is the tension between old and new minorities and the treatment that has to be made or has to be given to these 2 different kind of minorities. In relation to this, the citizenship requirement should not longer represent a sine qua non condition for defining national minorities, as it is made in many European countries. The Permanent Court of Justice in the interwar period already stated on this. And categories like religious and ethnic minorities are, I say, an open door for widening some definitions so far adopted, unlike the definitions, the traditional definitions of national or linguistic minorities, which are closer. So when we refer to religious minorities today, there is a confusion about who constitutes a religious minority. And in fact, what is happening is that this is a door which is opening the scope of application of the word minority to more groups. I'll come back to that in a minute. Why we are talking on this? Just because this is very important. It's a very obvious reason. It is important because it affects human rights and human dignity of the individuals. It affects the life, the concrete life, in very basic aspects of many people, maybe not the majority of the people, but just many people. So it's a human rights issue, and it's relevant. So what are our social and political responses to diversity, to this diversity composed by cultural elements such as ethnicity, religion, language, etc.? The fear to what is different, unknown, and the fear to change. I think that the human being is by essence, is conservative. It doesn't like very much the change or the innovation. And as soon as he or she is getting older, the less. Then also we have to consider the big impact of social communication means, mass media and social networks. This is the nightmare of politicians today, but it's the nightmare, I would say, of policies today. It's very difficult to make policies which are good for human rights and for the future of society when we have mass media and now social networks disturbing the messages and introducing bad messages and adding fuel to the flames and things like that. Do you remember in 2008 they did this big report in Quebec, the Bouchard-Taylor Commission on the accommodation of diversity in Quebec? There was a very big project because there had been some problems. And one of the main conclusions of this report was that it was the fault of the mass media. So the problem was that the mass media created more problems, so enlarged the problems. And of course, electoral competition. Democracy is about electoral competition. And if I'm a politician, I need to win the next election to hold the job. So it's about the short term. These are issues: integration, migration, cultural diversity, human rights, issues of long-term policies, but we don't have the means to do long-term policies because the democracy is about short-term. It's very easy to create the image of a threat, the image of something which is breaking our country, our democratic and prosperous and developed country, like Switzerland. It's very easy to create with an image something which destroy maybe books and articles and papers you produce. Well, and also we have a very deep assimilationist culture in each of our countries. And this is one of our main problems as well. We belong to this big tradition, Christian, Jewish tradition, and this myth of Babel Tower means that diversity is a punishment sent by God because we behave in a bad way by building this big tower. So God punished the man by sending what? Linguistic diversity. So they didn't understand each other, so they disseminate and they divided and all that stuff, which means that diversity is a punishment. Diversity is not an asset, it's not a good thing, it's not something rich, it's something which is painful in our culture. That's deeply rooted in our culture. And it's not putting us in a good position to face really what's diversity about. And also most of the citizens in any of the European countries tend to believe in these big ideas, which are assimilationism. So diversity is a problem for governing a society. It would be better if there is no diversity. So most of the people think that it's easier and better to have a school with one language than having 30 languages in the school, which in the first moment is a problem. So the attitude is negative from the very beginning. So that's bad for making policies in favor of diversity. Most of the people think that any society needs cultural common elements for its social cohesion. And I say most of the people in the society, and maybe most of you, and maybe most of the scholars, they think it's better to have common cultural elements in a society, for creating more social cohesion. And it's not true. And it's not true. Thanks, we have Switzerland in the middle of Europe to prove that it's not necessary to have a common language to be very proud of being Swiss. They don't speak the same language. There is no Swiss language. They speak different languages, but they are all very proud of being Swiss. In other countries, in Spain, there are different languages spoken, but all citizens can speak Spanish language normally, so we can all communicate in the same language, but there are millions of people willing to be independent from Spain. So speaking the same language does not guarantee that you are going to have more cohesion. But still, most of them, I would say 95% of people, believe in this. And they insist in promoting one national common language. The new citizens, in case they are migrants, recent migrants, I don't know how many years you need for being a migrant, how many years long is that? Sometimes it's 60 years, you are still a migrant. They must integrate in the society, they must respect the values of the reception society. What values? Many times I ask, what values are the values of this society or that society, Slovenian society, the Basque society, I don't mind. Many times, two brothers, two sisters from the same family, same background, same language, same religion, same family. They may have opposite views on respect to one of the most fundamental human rights, right to life. They may have very opposite views on abortion, on euthanasia, in the same family. And it can be a mess, the Christmas meal in the family because of that. So, what are these values in which the others have to be integrated when obviously we are diverse, because any society is diverse also in values. So this is another myth. Also, managing democratically diversity implies an economic and social cost. So we are fair, we respect human rights, so we spend money on this. This is a cost. It is always seen as a cost, not as an investment. When we talk about health care prevention policies, we think in terms of investment. We invest in preventing cancer not to have additional costs in the future. But when we talk about diversity, people see that we are spending money in new books, in translation, in what it is and what. They are not seeing that we are preventing or we are creating more competitive people for the future, for instance. Finally, majority in each country, because democracy is about short term and it's about states. And in each state, majority is legitimized to adopt decisions on the models of diversity management. This is also very deeply rooted. All kinds of decisions can be adopted by majority in this respect. But obviously, the will of a whole people cannot transform into fair what is unfair. So here is another delicate point, how to distinguish those elements which cannot be voted by majorities, or cannot be adopted by majorities. Because democracy is not only about the rule of majority, it's also about how minorities are treated. Well, so the problem is that we are based on states, nation states, which are identitarian states, and this is the political framework in which we live. The European nation states are closed systems of belonging, and this applies to immigrants, this applies to those who are different. Sometimes this also applies to minorities, to traditional minorities as well, and this applies to Roma population, etc., etc. In each country, the human rights are supposed to be universal, but in each country, the human rights have been nationalized, have been filtered through the majority view of that country, those who had the dominant power to say what does it mean freedom of expression, what does it mean freedom of religion, what does it mean so many things. So human rights are not universal in practice. And of course, the law, the legal order, the legal framework is in itself a cultural product. It's a cultural product of the majority, created by the majority, or at least the dominant group, which in democracy normally tends to be the majority, in terms, also in cultural terms. And in the politically correct discourse, there is, and it's good that at least the discourse is like that still in Europe, that diversity is good, that we have to welcome diversity and all that stuff. But also we have to promote social cohesion. Remember, one language, one whatever. It's a false tension, because when you analyze more in detail, you can prove that in the name of social cohesion, we delete and we don't really promote diversity. Well, and all this affects the exercise of human rights, so that's why it is very important for us, this topic. And this is a graphic representation of how I see now let's say the areas of potential discrimination which are happening in our societies. And they come, in my view, from three different dynamics and perspectives. One is, of course, the legal framework, which defines nationals and non-nationals, foreigners, aliens. Okay? So aliens, that's a legal difference. It's very clearly legally defined who is a national, who is not. And that's one subject of potential discrimination, okay, for people. So if you are a foreigner, you have less rights, and you are subject to potential discriminations. Another one is to be a minority member, those minorities we have tried to define before. So it's a cultural difference. Maybe you are a national, but you still have some cultural differences. As the human rights in your country are filtered by the cultural majority, your way of exercising freedom of religion, for instance, or freedom of expression is not recognized, is not accepted, is not promoted, or is not funded by the state. So you can be subject also to discrimination. Sometimes some minority people are also foreigners, other times they are not. And of course, not all foreigners are in a minority condition. And then the third element is visibility, something which is not used in Europe. In North America, they use the expression visible minorities. We don't use that in Europe. I think there is a prejudice. But visibility is very important. Sometimes visibility is, of course, the skin color. That's very visible. But it's also the dressing is visible sometimes. Sometimes it's the accent is also visible in this sense. Okay, you may be in Spain, but maybe you are from Colombia. You're an immigrant from Colombia. You have been an immigrant from Colombia. Maybe you already acquired the Spanish nationality, so you are Spanish legally speaking, you are Spanish. But when you phone to rent an apartment, your accent means that you are in this red cycle. And maybe on the other side they say, oh, no, thank you, it's already rented. No, thank you very much. And in some cases, we combine the three, or two of the three. Visibility, the legal difference of alienness, and minoritiness. So it's the combination of these three elements which make most of cases of discrimination in our time. Well, now I'll focus a little bit on religion as a specific factor. I will take religion as a specific cultural factor. And we could debate long about what is religion, what does it mean, religion, what is religion about. Of course, it depends on your perspective and your culture and your religious tradition, that you will define religion in a way or another way. So it's difficult to define. But it's the same difference with culture. And probably in both religion and culture, the point is that you have some elements that identify you, some liturgies and rites and practices, some beliefs, etc., and also some limits, restrictions, and regulations. So limits, limits of what you consider is good or acceptable and what is not acceptable. That's what is important for us, for everyday life, and for respect for human rights, okay? Religion was seen as a factor for social researchers in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, particularly in Western Europe. There were these big migrant flows to France, Netherlands, UK, Germany, etc. And when migration, integration, etc. was analyzed, religion did not appear. The religious issue was not a relevant issue for social sciences. And there was also this narrative of secularization of societies, so that societies would develop, and as far as they develop, religion loses importance and would remain in the private sphere, not in the public sphere, etc. So all this narrative has proved not true, so mistaken. And we have seen in the last 30 years the re-emergence of religious factors, religious relevance, religious diversity. And of course, religion is complex to define, but there are also more and more interactions between religions on things which are new. The phenomenon of believing without belonging. I do believe, but I don't belong. I don't want to belong to this church, but I do believe in God, and I have some beliefs, but not going to the church because I'm not a member. I don't recognize the authority of the church, but I do believe. That's very present in today's societies, but also belonging without believing, which is very interesting. How is that possible? Well, that can be proved, for instance. Previously I showed a picture of this Swiss conflict with the minarets, which happened in 2009 already, okay? Many people, atheist people, and I would say Christian atheist people, they voted against the construction of new minarets in Switzerland. Why? If you are an atheist, for you it's the same if there is a minaret or there is a bank, a tower of a bank, or there is a church, or whatever keeps or whatever respects the urban regulations of the place. No? This responds to this belonging without believing. So I'm not a believer, I am not part of the church, I don't consider myself to be Christian, but I don't want my village to appear with a minaret in the middle, because that shapes the image of your village, that shapes this traditional image of Switzerland. And it's not that you are asking for demolishing the tower of the church. You don't mind if the tower of the traditional church remains, but you oppose the construction of a new minaret in the same village. Well, that's belonging without believing. It's far more important. In this world of fluid identities, I was ironic on that before, but I repeat it. So most of the people are not so fluid in identity and feelings. And of course, syncretism, etc. So religion is complex, of course, but it does exist. It's relevant for many people, not for everybody, but for many people. And for the people, what is relevant is that religion is not present, which is always is the same. So it's, in any case, it's relevant. Of course, any religion, as I said before, any cultural system has limits, rules, and restrictions about what is acceptable, what is not. So there are direct implications on fundamental rights, and it's very easy to say that somebody is against normality, against what is acceptable, against the limits of those who have the power to define the legal order, so those who have filtered human rights in that respective country. Yeah, I will skip this analysis. Most of the European constitutions have a reference to religion in one way or another. Most of them. And I remember there are 40 discrimination clauses referring explicitly to religious issues. So it seems to be important in the European history as well. Just a short view of religious diversity in a particular European country, and I guess it's very similar to what is probably happening in Slovenia. Well, the Basque country, as Slovenia, has or was a very traditional Catholic country. Also with mountains, with many people living in the countryside, in big farms, etc. Like in the whole Alpine region, I would say very similar to this Catholic deep tradition. But, as you did in different ways, but we had a very deep process of secularization of society starting in the 70s. And very radical and very fast process of what was normal in 30 years in other countries, it happened in 10 years in the Basque country. Probably also for political reasons, because we were in the dictatorship, and that finished in the 70s as well. Not so different to what happened in Quebec or in Ireland, places like that. Now, what is the religious diversity today in the Basque country? We have a Catholic Church, which is still, of course, the majority, but in a secularized society, and the native clergy, the native members of the church are dying because there is no renovation. No young people going to the church now. So we import priests, Catholic priests, from other countries now, from Poland, from Ecuador, from Africa, etc. And this is the map or the numbers of the communities we have mapped in the Basque country. Okay? Catholic parishes, more than 700. Many, everywhere there is a Catholic parish in the Basque country. Minority worship places. We can count worship places. We cannot count believers. We are not allowed to ask people about religion. That's another of the big problems in the Western tradition, because you cannot ask people. You can ask people about languages, but not about religion. And then we don't have exact numbers. We don't have not approximate numbers of believers, which is bad for public policies. Without data, it's difficult to make public policies. But we can count the worship places. Of course, worship places does not correspond to a given number of believers, because in some religions these are bigger and some others are smaller, but gives an idea. Evangelical Christian churches, many. Orthodox Christian churches, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church wouldn't be a minority strict sense. And then we have Jehovah's Witnesses, Adventists, Mormons, Muslim, Buddhism, well, normal in, let's say, in a European society of today. But the condition of this, most of these worship places, is a precarious condition. So we have the traditional churches in the middle of each town, village, and many of them. And then we have the worship places of the minorities, which are things like this. This is for the Buddhists, or the mosque are also in these kind of places. So this is what is religious diversity about in this is a mosque. Obviously this is not, it's a place with some conditions, but obviously it has not the prestige of having a temple. Now the Mormons, they have built a very nice temple. That gives prestige and present the community in front of the rest of the society. The Muslims cannot do that for the moment. And in Spain we have a legal framework on religion, which is like a pyramid with different levels of recognition. So the Catholics, and then the Muslim, Jews, evangelicals, some others. So we have like different lists of rights depending on what religion you are. This probably is discrimination. I understand it responds to a tradition, so it responds to a dynamic which comes from the past. But seeing that in that way, it looks quite discriminatory from a legal perspective. Well, I go now to the third and last point, on policies, practices, and local institutions. I will come back to the religious diversity in the Basque Country and Spain. And before that, just some ideas to try to conclude something clear. Religious minorities are part of the total global framework of categories of groups. We have seen that. And religious minority today happens to be the most flexible concept among the classical threefold classification: ethnic, religious, linguistic minorities. So it's somehow, today is the vanguard of the evolution of the concept of national minority, because it's widening the concept. It's widening the concept because it's not clear who qualifies to be religious minority, and it's in practice we are qualifying more and more groups as religious minorities, something which does not happen with the concepts of linguistic minorities or ethnic minorities. Well, that's why, and probably this is a bit long, so I will skip a little bit. Also important to remind that religion, it is in itself the substance of one human right, one fundamental freedom, freedom of religion. And members of religious minorities, they have the right for the adoption of positive measures to ensure that they can profess the religious differences. So this is already recognized in the international legal order. And positive measures cannot be adopted in a discriminatory way. So that's why the combination of the framework of minorities, the legal framework of minorities, and this widening effect of the concept of religious minority makes the combination of that with the non-discrimination policies gives us the opportunity to face a more diversity policy in face of religion than a traditional policy of favoring only some particular minorities. So from migration to diversity, once again. So the new diversity, the diversity of today is diversity of the country, and in terms of religion, it is much easier, it's being much easier to adopt policies more consistent. Well, it's also true that there is a paradox here, because if we try to see which religious groups are minorities, we should find a criterion to define them. But any criterion is going to be probably arbitrary, so it can lead to discrimination. And at the same time, but if we qualify all the groups, if we say, yeah, all the religions can constitute religious minorities, then there is another paradox. Then what is the sense of recognizing a specific scope of protection? What is the sense of recognizing in Article 27 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights the right of members of religious minorities to profess their own religion? So what is the added value of minority rights if all the protection can be made and offered through the general right of freedom of religion? Do you follow me? So through freedom of religion, we defend, you can protect, and you have to adopt positive measures. Then the paradox is, what do we need? Another clause saying that religious minorities are granted whatever, because it doesn't add anything to this one. That's why I said at the beginning that the whole framework is very inconsistent and needs some clarification. So these two questions should be solved by lawyers and politicians and social researchers. Well, and now, because time is running out, so I will focus a little bit on one project. Okay, it's not so much a research project. So we have a research project. We have developed research projects on religious diversity, mapping religious diversity, but also analyzing which rights were in risk and how to deal with religious diversity, all this narrative. But at the same time, we always try to make research which is useful for something, okay? And offer to public authorities. also when we drafted the plans for immigration, for municipalities, for the region, for the state. And the academic work on religious diversity has been hand by hand with consultancy and advocacy work with the governments, both at the Spanish level and the Basque level as well, and also local level. And this particular project or program, if you want, links the state, so the Spanish level, because this, in Spain the state, not the region, is the competent to deal with religious organizations, and then the local level, the municipalities, which in principle they are not competent for dealing with religion, but in practice they have to face many issues which have to do with religion or with religious diversity in their everyday life. That's why we developed this program, Municipalities for Tolerance. Okay? The aim of the project is to help the municipal governments to manage religious diversity in a democratic, inclusive and pluralistic way. Most of the municipalities, they didn't know about religious diversity, they were not aware, or they considered that religious diversity was something linked to migration. So there were, for instance, a group of people asking a permit for opening a new mosque, and they said, go to the immigration office. But why? I mean, being a Muslim is not being a foreigner. You can be a Spanish citizen and be Muslim, and you can be a foreigner being very Catholic. So, and then one of the things that we have always explained is that this is not a question of immigration, it's a question of citizenship, it's a question of human rights, of diversity, not of migration. So this is addressed to all municipalities, all local entities, so the local powers, that want to make visible the commitment to recognition and adequate management of religious diversity, and improve this. Okay? And it is composed by two big pillars, in fact two documents. Okay? But the two big pillars of the program is the Charter and the Action Plan. The Charter is no more than a political declaration. It's a political declaration, and with the form and the language of a political declaration. So a preamble saying that if you, the municipality, if you sign the charter, either you make in a plenary, you decide to adhere to the charter, so you commit yourself to orient your management towards the fulfillment of the following principles. So it's a broad language, it's a political language, okay? And then there are 9 points, 9 principles. Recognition of religious diversity as something positive, guarantee the freedom of religion, obvious. Elimination of discrimination, obvious. Promotion of respect and tolerance, etc. Promoting inter-administrative coordination and collaboration. Adopting mechanisms for consultation and participation of religious minorities. Promoting spaces for dialogue among the churches and religious communities. Promoting research and training. And disseminate these principles. In fact, nothing new. So everything which is said here could be inducted from the Constitution and the legal framework, some way. But this is a political statement. So the first step is to convince the municipalities to sign this specific charter, saying, no, religious diversity is good. Also because for many people, religious diversity is not good. So there are many people who are not religious themselves, which is totally fine. It's okay, of course. That's also part of freedom of religion. But there is also, because of this strong Catholic tradition, there is also a strong anti-clericalist tradition in our country. So, and according to this anti-clericalist tradition, because the church was part of the power in the past, so there is an opposition to all kinds of churches and religions and beliefs. They should be removed for any public space. And then they defend that religious diversity is not something positive. So this is the first step to sign the charter. So it's political commitment. And if the municipalities, they feel comfortable enough, they may move toward the second step, which is the action plan. So the second possibility, you adhere to an action plan. The action plan is another document, okay? With general and specific aims. But the specific is to develop this charter, to concrete, and to promote and guide the municipal activities, to concrete the charter into what? Into very specific and clear measures to be adopted by the municipality. So what we did when we drafted this was to take the whole legal framework and possible competencies, powers of the local entities or municipalities, direct or indirect, having to do somehow with religion, and then to list a large number of possible measures, actions to be taken by the municipalities. Okay? And then to create a big menu of measures. The menu of measures is this one, specific measures for the different areas of municipal action. And then that includes classified in 11 different areas of municipal policies, 161 concrete measures, actions that can be adopted. Not all of them could be adopted at the same time because some of them are alternative. If you are a very big municipality, you can do this, but if you are not, you cannot do that, and maybe you can do this one. So, among these 161 measures, 26 of them have been qualified as basic. So, fully necessary to have a minimum respect for freedom of religion. So these are the 11 areas. Very relevant issues here are, for instance, cemeteries and funeral services, social intervention, urban planning and worship places, citizen participation, attention to citizens and municipal organization, and some others, training. These are just examples of how the measures are drafted. Sometimes it's a long drafting because you have to precise what is the meaning of this or that, or you have to open different possibilities, taking into account that, for instance, in Spain as a whole, there are 8,000 municipalities. And so that means that they are very, very different. You have municipalities of different million people living there, some municipalities of 10 people living there. So obviously the means, the context is so different. Well, the point, I think this is more relevant. The point is that the idea is that the small municipalities, we put a barrier of 50,000 inhabitants. It seems to be high, but obviously the main aim of this program is to start with big municipalities. Okay? But for the small municipalities, if they go to the action plan, they have to fulfill the basic measures, these 26 basic measures, plus 10 additional measures. So they can take from the list of measures, like in a menu. Like in a menu, they can adopt those who are more feasible, more, let's say, according to the context, the best measure for them. When the population is bigger, then we ask for additional measures, and for the big municipalities, we ask for a higher number of additional measures, but, and this is the most important thing, an explicit biannual self-assessment, so they do kind of a check. Every 2 years they check if they feel or not these measures, this list of measures, and then external evaluation. External evaluation means that there is a very small committee visiting the place and saying, let me see how are you fulfilling these measures. And we check. And we do the check normally with the technicians of the municipality, one politician and one technician dealing with this issue. and knowing the whole, all the areas of intervention, because they have to collect information from different departments. Okay? And then the idea is not to control, it's not to mark and to say, well, you failed, you didn't pass, etc. The idea is to help them. The idea is to offer them new ideas, offer them new measures, to analyze why some measures cannot be adopted, and to try to identify which measures would be easier for the municipality to fulfill in the future, or where are the big problems in that particular municipality. And then analyzing that, offering an action plan for the next 2 years in which they get a commitment to fulfill more measures. So we move forward every time, every 2 years. So this is the idea, to offer the municipalities not a control, but an aid to move forward and to reconsider how they deal with religious diversity at the local level. Sometimes because they didn't even imagine that they could adopt so many measures that appear in the list, because they hadn't thought of that. Of course, every year you have a meeting of the different municipalities involved, so you can also exchange information, good practices, and you can promote this, and you create a kind of a snowball effect, so to make it bigger. And now we have, this is the list of municipalities which are already part of this program. These two in green is because these are the two in the Basque Country, Bilbao and Vitoria-Gasteiz, which in fact are the two biggest cities in the Basque Country. And then these in red are big cities in Spain, very big cities. You see Barcelona, of course, everybody knows Barcelona. But the others, Malaga is also very big, Valencia. So it's this, in terms of population, Madrid is not yet, but Barcelona is the second one, Valencia is the third one, and then Malaga is the sixth one, I think, Granada, Valladolid, etc., and some other municipalities which have adhered to this program, little by little. Now, of course, to develop this program and to move forward, we will need more people trained to do these evaluations as well, because so far they have been made, because we have made with 6 municipalities so far this evaluation, 6. But only is there is a public foundation of the central government to deal with religious minorities, with limited resources, of course, the Spanish Federation of Municipalities, and ourselves in the Institute of Human Rights at the university. But of course it's because we have analyzed so far 6 municipalities. But now we have these almost 30 members, so we will need, for instance, more people trained and more people doing this to try to promote. And of course another thing which is lacking for the moment is that we don't contrast so much the information given by the municipality with the religious communities, only informally. But the next step would be to contrast also, to see what do you think about this and that, and how can we improve. So one of the main ideas is to also to help municipalities in creating fora for dialogue with religious communities. Sometimes we call it a table, we call it a committee, or not very formal, because normally formality creates complexity, also in legal terms. So, for instance, in Bilbao we have this table of dialogue with religious communities. Also the Catholic Church takes part in that, and there are a couple of plenary meetings every year, and to one of them the mayor of the city comes and stays in the whole meeting. So that's another element of recognition, valoration for the people of the minorities, and also exchange of information, because they collaborate more and more thanks to that. For instance, in the Ramadan, it's not only the Muslim communities collaborating for cooking for the meals at the end of the Ramadan, for instance, but other churches, Christian churches, they collaborate with them for the Ramadan as well, for instance, and I think all this is very positive. But it's also more positive that the rest of the society, those who do not belong to any minority or do not belong to any religion, they know that their mayor and the municipality is committed to manage diversity in a positive way. So this is the program. This is not a research program. This is an impact, or is the impact part of previous research programs, if you want. And it's part of what I consider that in social researches we have to try to do as well, to have an impact in public policies. So, just to conclude, let me say that we need more clarification, we need better definitions, and let me just finish saying that the right to equality means the right to difference as well. So rights, human rights, should be enjoyed through one's identity, not in spite of it. So we should try not to prevent anyone from being the way she is, and not imposing on anyone to be the way she doesn't want to be. So that would be like the final idea of these policies. And finally, let's remember that diversity is the logical, desirable and healthy condition of a free society. Diversity is the result of freedom. If in a society there is no diversity, it means that there is no freedom. So we should be happy of having diversity and of promoting diversity, even if we don't convince many people saying this, but it has to be said once again. Thank you very much. Voilà. I hope it was helpful.